Hello and welcome to part 2 of week 4, Signs and Symbols Enhancing Science Instruction Through Literacy in the MCCS Era. In this video, we are going to talk about metacognition. So another aspect of information processing that is important for teaching and learning is metacognition. As we will discuss, metacognition is important because it deals with how we reflect on and control the cognitive processes that are the focus of information processing perspectives. So metacognition can be defined as the monitoring and control of thought, and you read about this in your Martinez reading. You can also think of it as being aware of our own thinking, and specifically thinking about what our skills are, what our capabilities are, like our strengths and our weaknesses, and whether or not learning has taken place. For example, as you are introduced to someone new, you may think to yourself, I am not good at remembering names, so what can I do to remember this person's name? This would be an example of being aware of a weakness and attempting to engage in an encoding strategy to aid learning. Metacognition is a key part of the central executive, which we talked about related to information processing and the two-store memory model, and allows us to control our attention and processing and our encoding. So part of metacognition includes thinking about your skills and capabilities, such as we mentioned before, maybe it's difficult for you to remember names. One thing I know is that I have difficulty remembering main points sometimes when I read, so it helps me to make a list of topics I think will be important before I start reading. And again, that's awareness of my own capabilities and also knowing a strategy that I can implement to better aid my learning. Why is metacognition important? Well, as teachers, our goal is to support our students in learning, and research clearly shows that students who engage in metacognitive activities demonstrate higher achievement. So what variables influence metacognition? There are 3 key variables that affect metacognition, and those are task, strategy, and person or learner variables. In terms of task knowledge, that is how we perceive the learning task, or we can think of it as our ability to analyze the learning task. So we might think about things such as difficulty of the task. So in terms of content, am I familiar with this content? Do I have prior knowledge related to this content? Length, how long is the problem? How long is the reading that I need to read? Something like that. We may think about the type of assignment. So am I writing an essay? Am I filling in the blank, creating a diagram, or answering a multiple choice question? So another important thing to think about related to the task is relevance. So why am I doing this? And just being able to recognize the point of a task. So what is my goal when doing this? And this will impact the effort that we are willing to put into a task. And this is something that we can really help our students with by making the relevance of what we're doing explicit. So we also need to think about strategy knowledge, and strategy knowledge is the awareness of the strategies that we can use to improve our learning, as well as when and why to apply these strategies, or that conditional knowledge. For example, young children can be taught a strategy to use for a specific learning task, but will not or will have difficulty applying the strategy in similar learning tasks. However, as students get older, they begin to use strategies on their own. Some research has shown around age 8. And in the upper elementary grades, they begin to develop a better understanding of which cognitive strategies are effective in different situations and learning contexts, again, with that conditional knowledge. So that's really an important thing to allow our students to practice. When and why would we use a particular strategy for learning? Also keep in mind that person knowledge, so the understanding of our own capabilities, things like how good am I at this particular strategy, or what things do I have difficulty with. So we'll go through some of the metacognitive strategy types. There are 4 major categories of metacognitive strategy type. There's goal setting or planning, monitoring, affecting, and evaluating. So, goal setting or planning is deciding upon the goal and determining how to reach that goal. When learners engage in this type of metacognition, they ask questions like, what am I trying to accomplish? What level of performance do I want to achieve? Or what strategies do I need to use to accomplish this goal? Monitoring is checking on how well the planned strategies are working by determining whether learning is taking place or your goal is being met. So, when learners engage in this type of metacognition, they ask questions like, do I understand this? Are there things that I don't understand? Could I explain this to someone else? Am I ready for the exam? What parts of the response am I sure of? What do I need to add to my response? And do I understand the concepts that I need um, in order to make additions to what I'm doing? Affecting is using what you have learned while monitoring in order to change strategies. So once you have monitored, you need to use what you've learned in order to change strategies or not, depending on whether you are effectively reaching your goal. This sounds obvious, but this is often where students get stuck and where we can relate metacognitive monitoring to strategy use. For example, working with middle school students reading science texts and working on experiments, many of them are good at figuring out when their reading strategies aren't working and when they don't understand something that they've read in the text or when something in their data doesn't make sense. However, where they often get stuck is in what to change about their strategies to help them repair their understanding. Often at that point, they need some support from the teacher to figure out what they should do or maybe which strategy they should try. So the fourth strategy is evaluating. Once you have completed what you're doing, reached your goal, evaluating is examining your learning outcomes to determine the effectiveness of the strategies used. So did you reach your goal in the way that you were hoping to? How you evaluate is going to depend on what your goal is. We would hope it would be more than just, I got a good grade, but would also include what is understood and what is not, and what can be done differently next time to improve learning or goal attainment. Feedback at this stage is very important, and this is where formative assessment processes can be particularly effective to help make changes for the next time if needed. So, metacognition and reading, getting to some of the literacy aspects. When we are speaking specifically about reading comprehension, there is a unique term called metacomprehension. And metacomprehension is awareness of whether we understand what we have read. And when we're thinking about this, let's go ahead and try to apply this term to all decoding of text with our expanded definition of text that we discussed in week 1. So in metacomprehension, students have the realization that their comprehension is either good or poor. And they should be asking questions like, am I sure I understand this? Am I paying attention to whether I understand this? And this question can relate to individual words and symbols or to bigger ideas and overall comprehension. An example that I often use is, sometimes I'll be reading a paper or something and I might read a whole page and then stop myself and say, okay, what just happened on this page? And there's sometimes where I really couldn't tell you. But I think, sometimes our students, they read, they get through it, but they don't really have that realization of whether or not they completely understood what was being said in the text. And of course, we also need to think about metacognition and writing. Time to plan for writing and using tools like those suggested in your reading from last week can be ways of helping students to be metacognitive during the writing process. As teachers, we can also help students to use writing as a metacognitive tool to reflect on their learning and things that they know or things that they don't yet feel comfortable with by allowing them to write about and explore those ideas through their writing. So obviously literacy and literate practices can also be a really important part of being metacognitive. We need metacognition in order to be good readers, writers, speakers, listeners, but we can also use those tools to help us aid in our metacognition. So again, this has been a overview of metacognition, which is a part of information processing theories. Thank you.